right, hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about jobs in the dive industry again. I'm here with Sydney. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about being a scientific diver and what that looks like. So, to start out, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Hi, my name is Sydney, and I'm currently a graduate research assistant at FAU Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, and I also am a AAUS scientific diver there. I grew up in Western New York near Buffalo and Rochester, did my undergrad at Stony Brook on Long Island, and then immediately moved down here to start my master's degree.
Nice. And then how long have you been diving for?
I started diving about 5 years ago, and now I have my scientific diver certification and also my rescue diver through PADI.
Okay, so for your job as a scientific diver, what are the qualifications needed for that job?
Yeah, so you actually only need your open water certification, but we do have to go through a separate set of training through AAUS. We did a couple pool days learning how to use our different scientific equipment and get checked out using our dive gear. So in our lab that I work for, we use tech gear, even though don't have any tech certifications, but just to streamline everything since we're working with corals on the benthos and you don't want to get snagged on anything or damage any corals. So getting checked off on using that gear. And then we've also been trained using things like DPVs, so we can scoot around underwater on the reef to do our work. So just getting familiar with a bunch of different scientific equipment and just double checking that we're comfortable in the water and can task load while diving.
Right. So for the scientific diver certification that through AAUS scientific diver, can you tell us a little bit about the process of getting that certification? Because I know I've looked it up before.
Yeah.
And you can kind of get some information on it, but also specific question I want to ask is that I feel like most of the time I've seen it, it's you have to be through a university to get it.
Yeah, that's how most programs are. I feel like the main ones I've seen, you have to be a student, and it's being incorporated more and more as more jobs want you to have that qualification, but I know some undergraduate programs that now have that incorporated into it, but I feel like at the graduate level they really support you and sponsor you to get that extra certification. I believe there are some NGOs or other nonprofits that might certify people, but it's really just university based, and that's the most accessible way.
I think the only other place I've seen it is there's a select few aquariums that do it as well.
Okay.
But basically I bring this up to point out that if you're wanting a job that requires a scientific diver certification, you're going to have to get it while being a student or working for an aquarium, one of the niche aquariums that offer it or something like that. So something you're kind of going to have to think about in advance. You couldn't by the time I kind of learned about the scientific diver certification, I was out of school. It's a little late for me to go back now. It would be really hard for me to get that certification unless I re-enrolled in school, because I don't think they even let you do it where you sign up for the one class credit towards getting it. You have to be a full-time student.
Yep. So in undergrad you would take it as a normal course with whatever other course load you're taking, and then as a grad student we've in my lab have been sponsored by our advisor, basically our boss, to take that certification because our research requires it.
Right.
Within our university, at least, we got checked off using certain equipment and making sure just that you can task load, because that's the main thing underwater. You have to be so in tune with yourself and your gear that that's just second nature, and you're focusing all of your attention on completing your data collection or operating whatever equipment. So it's just basically checking off that you can do all those things at once. So we did things like laying transect tapes underwater and practicing using data sheets and counting data while maintaining good buoyancy. We also did blindfolded underwater obstacle courses.
Ooh.
So just like if you can perform well under pressure and remain calm.
So pool, open water, and then is there any like classroom?
Yeah, so we did do a classroom portion, and within that we got DFA Pro certified. Also did our normal first aid and CPR courses. So those were all kind of bundled together, and once we completed those, did our pool days, and then we went into open water after that, and you have to complete 12 dives to get certified past 30 feet.
Okay.
And then to get certified to 60 feet, you have to do another 12 dives. And then to get certified to 100 feet, you have to complete 6 dives.
Okay.
And this whole time you are with someone who already has that depth certification.
Sure.
So your buddy has to already be qualified.
Right.
And then to maintain your AAUS status as a scientific diver, you have to complete 12 dives every year.
Gotcha. Yeah, which I know a lot of people also, I've heard, struggle with that.
Yeah.
That even though they got it like while they were in university, then like the gap between university and finding their job. So definitely some challenges that are posed with this line, but so good to be aware of before going down that route, to have those things kind of like lined up, figured out for sure. Okay, so then once you're certified, you know, you're good to go, you're working, what's kind of like your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so the lab I work in right now at Harbor Branch, we're studying corals, so doing a lot of coral disease work and coral restoration. We also have people in our lab that do tech diving and rebreather diving, so it's really diverse. And my work specifically is focused on Florida's largest restoration project. Mm-hmm. So what our field days look like is we pack the boat in the morning, head out either with nitrox or air tanks depending on what site we're diving. Mm-hmm. But we actually dive within a 2-hour radius of our school. So in the morning we could be driving an hour to a dive site or 2 hours. But once we get there, we unload the boat, set up all our gear when we're at the dock, and then head out. Usually that means we're going through inlets and then out to our nearshore reefs or some of our offshore reefs. But with my project specifically, we're going to these outplanting arrays, and they're these big reef setups underwater, and they consist of these cement bases that have 5 coral fragments outplanted in them. Mm-hmm. And these eventually grow into large coral colonies. So we have 48 bases at each of these sites that we monitor, and we're monitoring them monthly. Mm-hmm. So we get to see these corals grow into large colonies over time as they fuse together. So when we go down on all these dives, we carry clamshells, and we have, for those of you that don't know, they're just big bags that are easy to open underwater, and they contain all of our clipboards, any equipment we take down to re-cement any of the corals that have come unglued from the reef. We also carry cameras. Usually we have like one loose one that we use to take any pictures of any weird looking corals or weird diseases we see on the reef, but we also have one that has a stand with a scale on it, so it's like a top-down view of the coral colonies, and we can use these photos to go back and give them health scores, look at if they have disease, any bleaching, and just see how they're progressing overall. Eventually actually trace the area around them and see how fast they're growing over time. So once we complete that, for every single coral in that site, we go back up, have a little surface interval, and then hop right back in to do it at another site. And throughout a day, we can hit between 2 and 4 sites.
Very cool. So with that being said, I think a lot of times people assume that these kinds of jobs, you're, doing nothing but the diving, you're always in the water, but there's actually like the lab work side of it too. So like how much of the time is spent in the water versus in the lab? What the balance is? What's the balance between working or being in the water and being on land?
So lots of our projects have these deliverables where we have to deliver data at certain time points to our state collaborators. So what that looks like is mostly us just pushing all of our diving to the start of a month. So every new month we have to go out and do our monitoring, so that we have to do all of our dives for all those sites I just mentioned in the first week of a month. So typically we'll dive maybe 3 to 4 days a month, unless we have something come up like site maintenance, going out to find different temperature loggers or things that we just need to check on at each site. But our actual work is only 3 to 4 days a month. Yeah, so it's not a lot at all. But the rest of the time, we're doing lab work. So my project specifically is looking at coral genetics. So that means a lot of the time I'm in the lab pipetting DNA, running PCRs. So definitely a lot more lab work than field work. But
sure. Yeah, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I kind of like prefer that nice balance. It's really taxing and it's a lot, it's very physically demanding. So I actually prefer having that like break, that you get to, you know, be in the water and have access to the water, but also get to experience like just a more chill, calm
I agree
environment as well.
And especially as a grad student, I feel like balancing your coursework too with being in the field, like you just get drained so easily if you don't have that good balance.
Right.
And I also forgot to mention earlier, but we do go on research cruises a couple times a year. So that means you would be like living on a boat, diving every day, multiple times a day for a week to 2 weeks. So that's always something to look forward to. And we go to really interesting places like flower garden banks in the Gulf of Mexico, dry tortugas in the Florida Keys, and Cuba. So there's some like really interesting opportunities that pop up throughout the year as well.
All right, sweet. So pay. What is like the average pay for working as a scientific diver? Or like a range, or what can you tell us about like what to expect for pay?
Yeah, so with grad school, you really have to be careful where you decide to work. People won't tell you, but if you're going for marine biology or really any science field or related field, you can get your graduate degree paid for. So I would just throw that out to anyone looking to join the field. Like, definitely look in your grad schools and make sure you're going somewhere that will pay you for your time. So taking that into consideration, lots of programs will waive your tuition throughout your program, but also pay you a stipend on the side. So it's not a lot, but it's a living wage and you're getting your schooling completely covered, which is nice. So usually you just have to pay things like student fees and then just cost of living wherever you are.
Okay. And then like for positions, like do you know anything about scientific diving positions outside of college?
Yeah, so I've been looking for things like to do after grad school, and there's actually been lots of jobs posted recently. Some that I've seen pay like between 50 and 70,000, but
that's what the archaeologists, there's marine archaeologists that do, so like you could work for FPAN, you could work for the National Park Service, you could work for AAUS directly. I don't know what any of the actual salary ranges for those are, but like we make 16 to 25 is like average for a grad student, 16 to 25,000 a year, which is not a lot in South Florida.
Oh, not an hour, a year.
Yeah, and then working for any of those places, like even if you were primarily a scientific diver for like the Florida Public Archaeology Network or something, I can't imagine you making more than like 40 to 50 as like just a scientific diver.
But if you have all these other qualifications, and you can like do administrative work and also some like lab work or data work, like you can make up to like 70,000 or beyond that if you go on and get additional degrees. So just kind of depends what specific field you get in within scientific diving in the science world, and what your qualifications are. You can be a DSO for like a university and teach scientific diving, and also like manage all the boats and all the diving operations there. So that's a really interesting job that you can do and teach others AAUS.
We'll do a whole separate dive job video about DSOs because there's a lot of different sectors also that you can do dive safety officer as. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's also places where you can like it's basically like volunteer work as well.
Yeah, and especially like when you're getting into the field, that's predominantly what it is.
So you're gonna range anywhere from
0.
volunteer, which would actually be negative. Because
Yeah.
you're probably going to be, well, depending on the situation, you might actually be paying for, like, staying there, living, whatever, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Up to, like, $70K or, like, if you go on to get, like, doctorates or further education like that.
Yeah.
You can maybe get above that. And then also keep in mind for these types of things that, like, pay is going to depend on the area as well. So with cost of living, like, if you're down in the Keys, it might pay, 80, 90K a year, but the equivalent of that in, Missouri is going to be like 60K, probably, maybe, if you're lucky, because the cost of living in the Keys is so high.
Yeah, and with a lot of these positions too, diving, like you get to do scientific diving within the position, but it's not a full diving job. It's just one portion of your job.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All good things to keep in mind. Okay. So then, if you want to just list like what are like the pros and the cons of your job, and obviously some of these things can be things you've already touched on, but just kind of like the major pros and cons.
I feel like one major pro of scientific diving is the fact that you get to work on so many diverse projects within the university, just because you're diving with students that are studying sharks or physical oceanography or sponges and corals. So you just get exposed to lots of different types of diving, lots of different research methods, and lots of different people, which I think is one of the most interesting parts, and just learning about their work and why they're drawn to dive and work on the ocean. I think another major pro would be exposure to different dive equipment and just getting comfortable with using different equipment and like perfecting your own skills like buoyancy and task loading, and you just have to be, as I mentioned before, like really in tune with yourself to be comfortable with doing those skills. So I think it really enhances your experience as a diver, and you're a better diver because of it.
Yeah.
Cons, long days. Obviously you're not getting paid extremely well, but as a grad student, I feel like that's different than if you were doing this for your whole job. But another con that I've only kind of experienced, but I've heard from a lot of people within the community, is that working diving, it kind of can take away from recreational diving. Like if people are in the water working constantly for their job, they don't necessarily want to go out of their way in their free time to go dive recreationally. And I feel like that's also an issue with like if you're instructing or a dive master, like
any job in the dive industry, that's a little bit of one of those things where turning something that's like a passion that you enjoy into a chore. Kind of.
And especially with scientific diving, you're like, at least for me, you're like head in a coral, and you can't really like look around during the dive because you're focused on collecting data and doing that specific task. So you don't necessarily get to experience like all the other reasons why you like diving.
Right.
But it just depends on the day and what task you're doing.
Yeah, it's important to have balance.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and then your favorite and least favorite to tag on to that, unless those are like kind of fall right into the same category as the pros and cons.
Kind of like on top of the cons, this kind of popped in my brain, but there is like a lot of pressure to do your deliverables, get the data, get it in on time, and you just have that pressure coming from different people you're working with, or people on the boat, or different collaborators or government agencies. So it's just
Deadlines.
Yep, it's like filling out paperwork except you're doing it underwater. So it's just a whole nother level to that, and it can definitely get to people, and that's another thing that would affect like recreational diving. So that would be one of my cons or like least favorite things about the job. Yeah, I think my favorites, along with like meeting all the different people and learning about all their research and different types of diving, I think another thing would be just diving unique places, and your research takes you to different cool locations, like I mentioned before, like on research cruises. So
Oh yeah.
I just think it opens up a lot of doors and networking opportunities, and a day in the water is better than a day in the office.
Yeah, true. All right, and then the last question I have for you is the best advice you would give to someone looking to get into this line of work.
Yeah, I would say definitely research your options. I know I mentioned it before, but make sure you're getting paid for your work. If that means you're getting a degree out of it too, that tuition's waived for, that's an excellent opportunity. And just know your worth, and don't settle for anything less in terms of pay and how you're treated within the field.
All right, and then do you want to link your socials or anything?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Instagram. My personal account is slb.11. I also have my photography page, sid.goes.wild, which is all like my underwater adventures. But my primary page is at Title Tees Apparel, and this is my sustainable ocean apparel company that I donate 100% of profits to different ocean conservation groups.
Yeah, anytime you see my skeleton hammerhead bikini in my vlogs, that's the Title Tees. Yeah, awesome. All right, if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them. Or direct them directly to her. That's probably the best way to go. But, you know, you can chat in the comments too. That's fine. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!